Good evening and welcome to the public session of the Halton District School Board for Wednesday, February the 17th, 2016. I would like to welcome everybody and call you to order. I'd like to note regrets from Trustee Gaventz. I believe that's the only person missing at this point. I'd also like to acknowledge that we are on the traditional territories of our First Peoples. I would like to remind you that, to silence anything that makes noise. So if you have a phone or a computer that is speaking, if you could please quiet it, I'd appreciate that. Our first item is approval of the agenda. Can I have a motion to approve the agenda tonight? Trustee Collard is seconded by Trustee Reynolds. Is there any discussion on our agenda tonight? No, you have to sit here till we modify it for approval. Okay, all those in favor? And that passes unanimously. Thank you. I'd also like to remind everyone that we are being video voice recorded and it is being telecast out to our public. I guess everybody wave. Okay, so do we have any declarations of possible conflict of interest tonight? Seeing none, we have no delegations or presentations. So I'm looking for approval of our minutes from February the 3rd, 2016. Do I have a mover? Trustee Pappen, seconded by Trustee Oliver. Is there any discussion on those minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor? Thank you. That passes unanimously. So our next item is approval of business transacted in private session, and I believe there are a couple items.
Yes, there are three. The first having to do with legal matters, report 16033, and I so move.
Do I have a seconder? Trustee Gray. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? That passes unanimously. Thank you. You have a second item?
Yes. The motion reads, be it resolved that the Halton District School Board ratify the Memorandum of Settlement which was reached with the Halton District Education Assistance Association, HDEAA, on January 26, 2016, subject to ratification by the association. And I so move.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Trustee Collard. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? I'm picking the right one. And that passes unanimously. Thank you. And the next item?
Be it resolved that the Halton District School Board ratify the Memorandum of Settlement which was reached with the Ontario Secondary School Teachers Federation, District 20 Halton, Professional Student Services Personnel, PSSP, on January 27, 2016, subject to ratification by the union. And I so move.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Trustee Harvey Hope. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that passes unanimously. Thank you. Is there any other items? Thank you very much. So we are now up to our action items for tonight. The first one is feedback, program and accommodation review policy, Director Miller, report 16029 on page 12 of your board package. Director Miller.
Thank you, Chair Amos. You have the report before you. We only had two responses, which we've already shared with trustees. So,
Is there any speakers or questions on this motion tonight? Seeing none, just a minute, I will read the motion. If I can find it. For some reason, yeah, I found it. There, I know. Okay. Be it resolved, the Halton District School Board approved the Program and Accommodation Review Policy as appended to Report 16029. Moved by Trustee Pappen, seconded by Trustee L. Harrison. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? All, that passes unanimously. Thank you very much, Mr. Renzella. We didn't have any questions for you tonight. You did such a great job last time. Have a great evening. I just noticed I skipped over notices of the order paper. Is there any questions or comments on the order paper? Seeing none, then we'll go back. Okay, so the next item is policy revision, discrimination and harassment. Executive Officer McFadden, report 16026 on page 27 of your board package. Welcome, Executive Officer McFadden.
Thank you. Through the chair, this report was brought to you at the last board meeting, and the revisions are before you as suggested at the last board meeting by trustees. There is now a reference to the Occupational Health and Safety Act, and a couple of grammatical corrections have also been made. So it is here for your approval to be posted on the board's website. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any comments or questions for our speaker tonight? I see one. Trustee L. Harrison.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. My question is with respect to the posting. So it gets posted on the website, and then how do people know that it's been posted? And I may have a follow-up. Thank you.
I'm going to defer that to Manager Gortmaker, as I have no idea.
Through you, Madam Chair, to Trustee L. Harrison. As per our practice, we put out a tweet, we do a news release, and we communicate it to our distribution list, which includes school council chairs and our community partners. If there is another group, we would certainly take that under advisement and include them as appropriate.
Thank you. Did you have a follow-up? Okay. And there are no other speakers to this topic, so I will read the motion. Be resolved, the Halton District School Board Discrimination and Harassment Policy, as appended to Report 16026, be posted on the board's website for public input for a period not less than 25 days, and any input returned to the board for consideration at the first board meeting in April 2016. Moved by Trustee Oliver, seconded by Trustee Gray. Is there any further discussion on this motion tonight? Seeing none. All those in favor? And that passes unanimously. Thank you very much, Executive Officer McFadden. So our next item is School Year Calendar 2016-17. Associate Director Bogue, Report 16025 on page 29 of your board package. Associate Director Bogue.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Through you to trustees, this report was presented 2 weeks ago today, and I'm happy to answer any questions that trustees might have.
Thank you. Questions or comments for our speaker tonight? Trustee Collard.
As per my
comments 2 weeks ago. I'm hoping that when this goes to the ministry, December 27th and January 2nd will be listed as holidays and not board holidays.
We will correct that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Harvey Hope.
Beat me to it on one of them, but my other question is, because this is a revised calendar versus the ministry, somewhere out in the community the last 2 weeks, I talked about this and they had a different idea, and I said, oh no, it's, this is what we're thinking of doing. And so because of the fact that it is different than either the intuitive or what we've done before or whatever, I wanted to know, I know there's a process by which the ministry has to approve it, but I'm wondering if there's a way that we could highlight the fact that we have sent it to the ministry for approval, and notwithstanding that, this will be our calendar, so that people have a way of planning ahead, because in some cases, some people may have lost a week of what they thought they were going to have, or now have opportunities to do things, those kinds of things.
Director Miller.
Through your chair, Amos, to Trustee Harvey Hope. I mean, it's been on a board's website. I would be hesitant to highlight this because it could put the ministry in an awkward position if they were to deny this, and we've put it out there that this is going. So, pardon?
I asked to say that could we highlight that we had passed this revised and waiting for ministry approval, not that we would go ahead and say this is going to be our new calendar, but just a way to, in effect, highlight the board motion that passes, if it passes.
I still have the same concern that by highlighting it, I think we are upping the ante, so to speak, and probably not advisable. But I mean, it's going to be public after this that it's going anyway. But by highlighting it, we may be upping the ante with the ministry. I would prefer we don't do that. And this is in line, and I'll look to Associate Director Bogue with Peel and Hamilton and Toronto and so on. So, but
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Then I will read the motion. Oh, sorry, Trustee Reynolds.
Yes. Good evening. I just wanted to reflect that piece. Lots of members of the community ask me, I don't sit on this committee, but ask me about the alignment with other boards in terms of the vacation days. So I was really delighted to see that alignment, and I'm very excited for people because some kids, some families who work here have kids in other boards, so this kind of alignment is certainly helpful. So I'm very glad and thankful to the committee who worked very hard on this.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers? You want to comment? Okay, Director Miller.
thank you, Chair Amos. I just want to thank Associate Director Bogue. This particular committee, which I chaired last year, is much more complicated and difficult than one envisions. And there's many, many stakeholders at play and many conversations that happen. And we just see the tip of the iceberg when it comes here. So I want to thank Associate Directors Bogue's leadership on this.
Thank you. And seeing no other speakers, I'll read the motion. Be it resolved, the Halton District School Board approve the summary of statutory and board designated holidays and professional activity days for 2016-2017 as recommended through consultation with the School Year Calendar Committee. Moved by Trustee Gray, seconded by Trustee Harvey Hope. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that passes unanimously. Thank you very much, Executive Officer Bogan. Please offer our thank you to the whole committee for all their hard work in reaching these dates. So we're up to the highlight of the evening, our student trustee reports. Trustees Schneider and Sahai.
Good evening, everyone. So our last Tuesday, we had our Senate meeting here in the board office as well in Milton at Milton District, supervised by our lovely student trustee advisor, Donna. So what happened at that meeting is we had discussions on our upcoming conference, so that will be at the Sheridan later this year, and that will consist of workshops like always, but focused on the transition. So that's 8 to 9 and from high school to post-secondary. So we're working on that, but more excitingly at our meeting we had a huge panel on, we had the people from assessment and evaluation come in, and the students discussed with them, asked questions as they did a presentation on assessment and evaluation appropriately as it was exam times for the secondary school students. And we did it separately, so the elementary had a different one than the secondary, different presentation because their realities are different in terms of assessment and evaluation, and it served as an education piece on both ends. The students learned a lot from how we're evaluated, what the actual policies are. That was very cool to see how to advocate for themselves and for their own education if they don't see alignment in the classroom to those policies, which was very interesting as well, because a lot of the students had experiences that weren't necessarily right. They felt it wasn't right, but it was also not right in the policy. So they had to learn how to take responsibility for their own education and have that kind of advocacy for themselves. But it was also educational on the other end, as the students got to say their realities and maybe if there was something in policy that they didn't like, what they felt would be better for them. So it was a very, very interesting night. Even for myself, I learned a lot, and going back to school for the subsequent week, I saw so many things that we had in discussion, in practice, and I feel like a lot of the students did as well. So that was really good, and Joven has a few thank yous for that.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you to Superintendent Julie Hunt-Gibbons for her hard work on putting the Senate meeting together. I'd also like to give a thank you to the IPLs for assessment and evaluation, Mr. Phil Davison and Mrs. Maria Solomon-Diaz as well. And of course Donna for facilitating we had a kind of virtual meeting last time up in Milton as well, and we connected here at the board office through Google Hangouts, so that was also really cool.
We had the presentation that they were giving shared on there, and the microphone and everything set up there, so they could ask questions as well, but see the presentation on their computers. So it went well, and we'll see, although the turnout was low, so we'll see what we can do to improve that and what we'll do for next steps. We'll evaluate that. In other news, I'm going to a conference tomorrow for the Ontario Student Trustees Association, so the next meeting we'll have an update for you with what we learned there, what happened, and our next steps. So that's it for tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any comments or questions for our student trustees tonight? Seeing none, thank you for your continued hard work, and I look forward to hearing about the conference. And is there another meeting before? No, it won't be till after the next board meeting. Thank you. All right, so we're now up to notices of motion. Do we have any notices of motion tonight? Seeing none, we are now up to action items for March the 2nd. So the first one is Nelson High School Stadium Revitalization Proposal. Superintendent Cullen, report 16037 on page 35 of your board package. Welcome, Superintendent Cullen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And as you can see, this was sub-authored by a few superintendents because there's a financial component, and Superintendent Etai is in fact the superintendent of schools for the area. I'm just taking point on this particular part of it. And this is one of the first opportunities we've had to formally put the community funding of facility enhancements procedure into action. And the Nelson Stadium Group has been kind of in existence for many years, and this is their first real formal pitch to the board to do something together. So in the report, you have several background pieces that really relate to what is referred to locally as Nelson Stadium. It really is owned by the Halton District School Board. The stadium, football field, running track, et cetera, are owned by the Halton Board, but operated in a joint agreement between the City of Burlington and the school board. The lands to the east of the site are actually owned by the city, and they hold the change rooms for the teams, referees, and some of the other baseball venues that sit adjacent to Nelson High School. So there is quite a shared use going on at the site currently, and this is really the first time that the user group, so many of the sports clubs themselves, as well as Cogeco, that has an interest in televising some of the events, have come to the table and attempted to formalize some of the things they'd like to see done. The report contains 3 appendices that really, I think, give the background, and the direction that will be followed is really more our document than some of the ones that you might have seen. So we will, to some degree, take lead with setting the direction, and then the committee itself then has to take upon the task of creating a fundraising plan that is suitable for whatever the eventualities are that they do design or come up with. And at this point in time, it really is to put it in front of the board to get, I'll say, a approval in principle on our staff time and our commitment to go ahead and participate to some degree in this. And as you know, in the procedure, we have a limitation to how many projects we actually can undertake in this fashion. So this would be considered to be potentially one of a sizable nature, and therefore one of the ones that we would consider to use up one of those spaces. So if you haven't taken any questions related to the process, the project, or the next steps. Thank you.
Are there any comments or questions for Superintendent Cullen tonight? Trustee Reynolds.
Thank you. Thank you for this report. I want you to know I certainly support this this wonderful opportunity to work within the community for something that's, I think, well needed in Burlington. I'm very excited that we'll be using this through our community funding of facility enhancements policy, which will be new, so it'll be exciting. But I certainly support this, and I'll be delighted to lend a hand in whatever I can. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers to this topic tonight? Seeing none, this report will come back at our next board meeting. Thank you very much, Superintendent Cullen. Our next item is the OFA debenture. Superintendent Bierman, Report 16024 on page 58 of your board package. Welcome, Superintendent Bierman.
Thank you. Through the chair, this is a process that we entertain on a yearly basis. We have an opportunity to finance some of our outstanding debt with the Ontario Financing Authority. The information is included in the report. I believe that the trustees did receive a copy of the bylaw by separate email, and I'd be pleased to answer any questions.
Trustee Harvey Hope, can you press it again? Sorry. Any comments or questions for Superintendent Bierman? Trustee Harvey Hope.
Yes, thank you. Through you to, I guess, probably my fellow trustees, but also a thank you to Superintendent Bierman in that the capital cost budget that we are going to see later in the evening directly ties into the OFA, which is fantastic. Well, it's off $1, but it's rounding. So it's really neat to be able to see that all of the money that's expensed on that capital finance capital cost budget is directly tied in, and you can say yes, no, that's all the money we spent, and now we're going to get the money back. So it's one of those ways where we're tying up the crossing the T's and dotting the I's. So thank you very much for that, and I'm amazed that it's so little amount, but I guess we're still in the process of building everything else.
Thank you. Are there any other comments or questions on this? Seeing none, this will come back on March the 2nd. Thank you very much, Superintendent Bierman. Our next item is the OPSPA Labor Relations Symposium expense. Trustee Collard, report 16041 on page 60 of your board package. Trustee Collard.
Thank you. I'm just going to read the description that OPSPA has on their website. It pretty much sums up the entire event. OPSPA's annual Education, Labor Relations, and Human Resources Symposium is held each March and designed to provide professional development in the area of labor relations and human resources to trustees, directors of education, senior human resources officials, and labor relations staff. We explore current trends in the workplace. At the Sheraton Centre in Toronto, this year's focus will be on the impact of the first collective agreements under the School Board's Collective Bargaining Act on human resources and labor relations practices in school boards. The symposium provides senior school board decision makers with opportunities to share ideas and strategies, learn about next and best practices, and explore practical solutions to the challenges faced by Ontario school boards. And this is why I bring the motion, because what we do here around this table, when we ratify settlements such as what we did this evening, we need to understand what goes into those and how they impact our staff and how they impact how we are able to provide education to students. And so I think this is a vitally important symposium.
Thank you. Are there any comments or questions on this motion? Seeing none, this will come back on March 2nd. Thank you. Our next item is Administrative Center Update, Superintendent Cullen, Report 16038 on page 61 of your board package. These are the information items. Superintendent Cullen again.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The purpose of this report is really to kind of keep the momentum going. I think we've talked about this in the past, that our plans to hopefully either replace, create, or develop a new board office in some way have been in the early stages. We're doing some investigative work, we're doing some funding, and at this point in time, the report has some of the concepts about what I'd like to refer to as the adjacencies or the potential size. The real highlight of the report, I suspect at this point in time, is the funding and where it might go, and those are really in the next steps. But the funding approaches, I think if I were to paraphrase it myself, I would say that I think we're seeing some successes in those areas. We're starting to see some of the money start to come together, and the eventuality of going to the ministry to be able to leverage the balance out of the ministry, either by way of loan or other, it starts to seem much more probable and practical once we have a plan in front of them that starts to make sense, and we can justify and rationalize all of the things that we're planning to do. So at this point in time, I think the key elements, as I say, about the report itself are really about the reviews that have taken place in regard to the functionality of the existing facilities, what we do have, what we don't have, and how those might be configured in a future either rebuild or replacement of this particular facility that we're in tonight. And I'd be happy to take any questions related to that part of it, but remember that those are still, I'd like to say, well down the road, but not too far down the road. We're not really designing the facility at this point in time. It's still very conceptual at this point in time to start to get a framework for it. I'd be happy to take any questions related to that or the other items related to either location or funding, because they're probably our next key steps as we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any comments or questions for Superintendent Cullen on this tonight? Trustee Harvey Ho.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair, to Superintendent Cullen. I'm so glad to see this getting to this point. Sat out in the gallery the last time we tried to work this through. One of the questions I had was, I really liked the report. It's very thorough, but I wondered whether or not any of the trustees had been surveyed. Apparently the staff and all the other pieces as far as that, how to figure out the private-public piece. And it refers to board chamber and trustee meeting space, but there are a couple other rooms, I think, that the trustees thought perhaps would make it into the next iteration of the building. And before, I mean, I realize it's not at that phase, as you say, we're not designing the building yet, but right now it looks like per this thing, the director's office is on the top floor and the trustees are on the bottom floor, and you know, maybe that's on purpose, but you know, little things like coat room. It talks about hoteling for staff, but we also need the same concept for trustees. So those kinds of things, whether or not that had been taken into account. But I really like the flow of the report, the idea that, you know, this is something to honor our staff and their visitors and to be accessible. The daycare and the cafeteria ideas are interesting, as far as depending on where we also end up with this building. It may not be next door to other facilities. And I like the idea of it coming a little farther east.
If I may, Madam Chair, two of the concepts that I think have started to evolve as we've looked at either other designs or our own circumstance are what I like to refer to as the public-private element. So there's a big part of what we do that is, in fact, in the public domain and has to be, therefore, be not just visible, but accessible and those types of things. So I think when you see areas that pertain to the trustee functionality, it really is in the public domain. It is in locations where the public will be able to access readily, easily, but also we've also talked about the potential security issues. So how do we then have areas where there can be withdrawal of staff or of trustees in the event of, you know, an unforeseen circumstance? Having that conversation, the whole sequencing or flow of the building, if I could describe it, and I'm not sure if I have in the past, would be the public access points are exactly that. They're completely open and public, but beyond that, the functioning parts, internal working areas for staff would be in the more private area, if you will, and then staff can come to the, I'll call it a buffer zone or an intermediate area between the staff working area and the public area where the meetings take place. So there's really the sequence of the flow where the public come into meeting areas, staff come out of their areas to meeting areas, and you create that meeting area of a number of different meeting spaces in a intermediate zone. And that's part of the concept that's kind of been evolving as we go through that. Details around coat rooms and secure areas and things like that, we're really not at that point, but certainly we would get to that point where we detail the size, location, and configuration of those. But it's really more the overall flow. And it does, in fact, see some of the senior members, i.e. the director, being in a less public and approachable space than the current configuration, which has always been a bit of a curiosity to me, coming from a number of different designs and buildings, that would not be a typical configuration in most settings to put the directory in that particular location. Far too distracting, for one, but from the public, private, and then buffer zone, it's sitting right in the ideal location for a meeting room as opposed to the director's actual workspace. So.
Follow up? Go ahead. I guess my point wasn't so much about the specifics, it's just that it was there was a lot of math as far as square foot per person and no square foot per trustee at all in their content. So I'm just saying is that it seemed to me that, I know we're only 11 or 13 of us, you know, but that at 200, even at whatever ratio you want to use, we have trouble parking because we come at different times of the day. We have problems with trying to find a spot to sort of sit out. So I'm just trying to put out the 2 cents that when they do the math for how many square foot and how big, you might need another couple hundred square feet that isn't in the design specs at the moment. And also one of the other things that may not have been suggested is we have problems with space for a library. We get lots of reference material and books and those kinds of things.
Can you just wrap up? Because, sorry, your time's up. Thank you. No, I stopped when you actually stopped, so. Trustee L. Harrison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Wow, this is exciting. Thank you for this report. I have two comments. Firstly, with respect to the guiding principles as stated on page 5 of the consultant's report, I think there's a great opportunity here to align the guiding principles with what will come out of our multi-year plan, for example. A number of times the report references sustainability, and I know that can mean a whole bunch of things, but ultimately it goes back to the 1987 definition that was given about meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations. And I think it's commonly accepted that that definition includes economy, environment, and social, cultural. And the 5 guiding principles that are here now really speak to this social, cultural piece, which is great. But I just wonder about the economics piece, and I think that as a public organization, we have to be really conscious of that part, the costing of this. And secondly, environment, both the working environment with respect to wellness, as well as the natural environment. So that's comment number 1. Comment number 2, I was interested in the number of times that safety and security were mentioned in the report, and the differentiation between public and private spaces. And I'm just wondering whether this is also reflected in the best practices examples that were looked at, i.e. Hamilton, whether that was a big consideration there. And I wonder, to me it feels like it's a bit outweighing considerations like wellness and collaboration. So that was just something that kind of flag that went up. Thanks.
If I may just provide a few comments, there's been lots of conversation about, I think, all of the topics that you've raised. Certainly the economics and the fact that we are a public entity, publicly funded, I think is first and foremost in everybody's mind as we do this. I think the sensitivity around attempting to create a new board office has always been a bit of a challenge, in that our focus is always kids, students, teachers, schools, and we know that. That's our primary number 1 business. But at some point, we need to also address the other aspects of the organization. So I think the economic balance is there, and certainly will be there. We're not going to see a Taj Mahal, as everybody likes to say. It's going to be the functionality that comes in. Your comment about the safety and security is certainly one that has been addressed, but I wouldn't put it certainly would not put it higher than the functionality. So that the things that have been talked about in terms of the adjacencies of departments and sizes and growth are probably more complicated to figure out and to accomplish in the actual design when it comes to that than the safety and security ones. The safety and security ones is almost something we do to some degree now, and would probably have to spend less time developing theories and concepts that we know would work, whereas the functionality one is something relatively new. I think we're very good at building schools. We haven't actually built a board office in the entire existence of the board. So it's that's the challenging part. So I think you're seeing a little bit more attention to those elements because of that.
Thank you. Trustee Reynolds.
Thank you.
Sorry. Go ahead. I skipped by. Go ahead.
Thank you, through the chair. So I was happy to see that there was a significant amount of staff input that was taken to formulate this report. What I didn't see, or what I'd like to know, is since our greatest strength is our people. There's 350 people essentially who work in this facility. Whether these stakeholders, whether there was any mapping exercise taken of the stakeholders. Certainly, we'd want to know where they're coming from, what their commutes are, where they live and work. I realize that part of this design is focusing on being central to our schools and our students and our communities, which I very much respect. I think since our greatest stakeholders is our employees, I'd like to understand what sort of reflection in sort of changing their lives is going to happen?
We, again, through the chair, we had, again, great conversation about that particular topic, and I was on the other side of the fence. So once again, we can have a great conversation about where this one's going to go. Our focus was really on the functionality of the organization as it related to students and schools. The current, I'll say, living locations and transportation issues of the existing employees. At the end of our conversation, excuse me, we pretty much concluded that regardless of where the ultimate location was, some will benefit, some will lose, and not lose in that sense. I mean, some will have a greater commute, some will have a lesser commute. And that was part of the conversation that we had in regard to staying near good transportation routes, hopefully with public transit as an option. One of the things we've looked at has been to hopefully try and get out of everybody having to drive every day. Some of us travel during the day, and therefore, you'd need to have a car available. But many of the staff come to the building for the day. That's their entire work day, and they can then commute back home again. So we did not do that. We did talk about whether or not having some sense of where everybody lives and commutes to and from. But at the end of the day, realized that regardless of where the location ended up, it probably wouldn't be the deciding factor. It would be more around the functionality and availability of the location in Halton, and with more of a focus on the schools. And quite frankly, probably more of a focus on availability and suitability of the site, because it could really function. I think as we've demonstrated, we're probably in the furthest southwest corner of our jurisdiction as it is right now. And it does work. I mean, it creates some challenges, particularly for those that have to travel from the far north, but it still does function. So it could almost logistically be anywhere. And there will be numbers of people that indicate that it's better for them, and others that would say it was worse. So we didn't really make it a driving force at this time, but we're happy to have that as a consideration. Comment from you. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Gray.
Sorry, thank you very much. I had two questions. I was wanting to question page 33 of the report, where it speaks about, I guess, the progress or the flow chart of what happens next, and then finally it says, on the last sentence on the right-hand side column, once a short list of sites is proposed, we will complete the final part of the study, including. It sounds like the site designation is really at the far end of all of the planning. And I'm wondering, once the site is determined, would there be an immediate rush out to secure the site? I asked this question in light of the report that we had earlier tonight with the rising costs of land and developing land in the Halton region. And just thinking, even if we have the land determined and we hold on to it for a few years before we actually get to build, at least we may save ourselves lots of dollars. And I wonder if is that in the plan? The second question I had was about LEED certification. Is that something that we are seeking to achieve? And with LEED certification, is there any sort of tax rebate available to any one that certifies is able to build their building so that it receives that certification?
I'll start with the land one first. I think your observation about the land one, it is probably the next big key piece. So I think in next steps, as far as our report tonight, we've pretty much said that will become the next focus around evaluating, assessing, and determining what may or may not be available and how we would go about acquiring it. So you're right, that is very key to the next step. And I think because of timing and availability, as well as price, the sooner the better. So I would not disagree with that comment. I think you'll see that will probably become our next focus now that we needed to create some sense of the size and scale of the building and its need before we would be able to go potentially shopping, if you will, in that regard. As far as LEED goes, we haven't really talked about that in detail. I can tell you what our thoughts and our experience have been on schools. We've experimented a little bit in the realm of the LEED certification. And I'm going to, jump to the conclusion very quickly that because we're building schools time and again, they're schools, part of our issue was Lee didn't and doesn't to this date recognize that repetitive approach. Every one of the projects is treated independently and separately, and therefore the procedure and the fees and the certifications that they put in place to actually become LEED certified are very expensive and repetitive when we're doing, in our case, in some cases, literally a repeat school. It's an identical, and there's no, I'll say, price break or recognition that you're doing it the second or third time around, and that was a bit of a drawback for us. Again, great learning experience going through some of the techniques and procedures that come with LEED, which we're then able to apply to schools. So we've applied the learning without getting the certificate, and that seemed to be a good fit for us. That concept applies to schools. This, as I say, is our board office. This is a one-of, so it's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. So it may have some more relevance to pursuing the LEED process than a school would. So I think, like as I say, the learning that we've done is pertaining to schools, and there might be an opportunity or some different benefit to assess the relevance to going LEED certified for a board office. As far as rebates go, I'm not aware of any, other than I think that their statement would be that if you do build it to the design standards and criteria, that you'll see operational savings, you'll see energy savings, you'll see cleanliness issues, functionality of that nature. So I think part of their rationale and justification around promoting the program is around your goals as a sustainable entity, your recognition of the environment and the products that you use. The energy conservation things may bring some element of savings to it, but I'm not aware of any discount or benefit rebate type thing that applies to the actual fees.
Thank you. Trustee Harvey Hope.
Thank you. And this question is probably more likely to involve Superintendent Veerman, but I note in the Chapter 6 on the funding challenges that it talks about there's no funding sources for the capital piece of this, but we do get funded to some extent for the cost of administration of the school, of the board, I mean. So, and not for an answer tonight, but perhaps in our upcoming budget determination and conversations, we could have a discussion about what we are actually funded to do and what they expect us to do when we need to repair something. I mean, those kinds of conversations, because since we've been told we have to capitalize our assets, therefore there's this concept of depreciation, and at some point that would make that the building comes down to, it's not worth anything, and depreciation is an expense but may or may not be funded. At some point you got to replace the building, and to be honest, this is unreasonable that there is no funding for running the operation. So even charities are allowed to take a certain amount to run their operations. So I'm thinking that at some point maybe we should have a more fulsome discussion on the actual dollars around this. I understand the land piece, I understand the building, the fact that you can borrow the money, perhaps, but as far as actually figuring out how you would then repay it and the actual construction cost. I mean, the land seems to be the least of the problem. It seems to be actually the construction cost that's sort of floating out there. And yet that would be depreciable, and one would think be then an expense and not a capital item, therefore you should be able to recoup it. So I'm just saying is that conversation, I think maybe we should do a little bit of an education piece.
If I may, Madam Chair, I'll start and then let Superintendent Veerman possibly add to the comments. Your comments, I'll say, were correct or are correct and have been for many years, but the ministry has recently recognized or enabled boards to put one of their board admin facilities on the list of facilities that receive renewal dollars. So you're familiar with the renewal around schools, which has been, I think, a great accomplishment that's been achieved around the province about attempting to renew the assets of schools. And for some reason, that logic didn't apply to board offices or admin centers for quite some time, but they have now allowed us to put one of the facilities on as a board admin center that is eligible for some component of renewal funding. So that certainly does help in that regard. There's also the admin envelope, if you will. There are dollars that come in, and they will, I think, tell you that you have a choice to spend them on, what you wish, and if it happens to be the admin center. So there is some element of flexibility in there that does let us direct some of the unassigned dollars to the admin function. So we're starting to compile some sources of where that might come from. So I think it's looking, as I say, I think that part of it's starting to look better. And again, part of it is creating the need, demonstrating the need, proving the need, and then starting to say we now have something we have to address, and it's starting to, I think, fall into place. So I'll let Superintendent Bierman add her comments to that, if I may.
Thank you. Through the chair, as part of the last few financial year-end reports, we have presented a recommendation to start to allocate some of our surplus funds towards an admin building, and that's reflected in the accumulated surplus summary that, again, is presented to the board. We also have, at this point, some undesignated reserves, some working funds, which I'll be bringing a report to the board to redirect or reallocate some of those funds to the admin building. And then any amounts that have to be financed, we do need ministry approval, and the repayments would come from the board admin and governance envelope. So there's a number of strategies that we will be bringing forward and going through all of the details to explain the ramifications of each to the trustees so that we can continue on with this project.
In my 30 seconds.
Go ahead.
Also, the other piece is that right now we have staff that go between two locations during the day, or this location and another location, and that also perhaps might be captured in that would disappear if we were all in one location, right? So that would be an expense.
Go ahead.
Beyond the expense, that would do much for the culture of the system. I had a staff meeting in this building, and I had a separate staff meeting at New Street, and they were well received, but it was clear that I think people would like to all be in a similar, same place, same workplace, and so on. So it's not just about efficiencies, it's about culture.
Thank you. And seeing no other speakers on this topic, thank you very much for your report, Superintendent Cullen. We look forward to the next one. And I didn't mean capital update. Okay, so we're now up to capital update. Superintendent Cullen and Superintendent Bierman. Report 16034 on page 92 of your board package.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And this is one of the occasions when we do bring both the status of the reports as well as the financial status of the reports. So Superintendent Bierman will probably have to be the one to address the financial parts, since apparently I don't care about the cost. No. Anyway, that's just an internal thing.
Did I hear that correctly?
No, that's not correct at all. Anyway, the number of projects we have, as you know, does not contain any new schools at the moment, other than the replacement of the Martin Street facility. But the actual game plan from here on out will be to carry on with the list that you see before you, and again, take the ministry request for new builds as our next steps. And that'll be coming forward later. Happy to take any questions related to these projects, and if there are financial details that I can't address, I'm sure Superintendent Bierman would be happy to.
You mentioned that new builds is coming up later. You mean not tonight?
Not tonight.
Do we know when they're requesting that yet?
No, we do not. So the last comments that we've seen from the ministry would probably replicate the previous cycle that we saw, which was a late school year, possibly early summer request with a fall decision-making. But there is nothing that locks the ministry into that process. And if I may comment, we've pointed that out to the ministry on many occasions, that everything else that we do, everything else that they do, have very specific timelines. Why does the capital process seem to have this flexible element to it, which is really a challenge when it comes to trying to deliver schools for September openings on a regular basis? When you back step the steps needed to do that, it's pretty obvious when you have to do the ask and answer type thing to get there. So we have brought that to their attention. So we're hoping for a similar time frame.
Thank you for that. Questions and comments? Trustee Harvey Hope.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair, to Mr. Cullen, who's going to defer this to Superintendent Veerman. In the Pilgrim Wood Public School Capital Project Summary, first off, I love these charts. Thank you so much. Things I've gotten, I can follow them, I can cross-reference them, they're great. So I'm thrilled. One of the questions that I had when I was just looking at this, the capital build capacity, and I appreciate the fact that there was actually the description of what it is and where it comes from and how we get it. But I'm a little curious as to how we have in the original budget for Pilgrim Wood, capital build capacity was budgeted. I understand how you end up with it at the end, but I'm just wondering, and I'll just throw out a theory here, is that when we get the announcement from ministry, it's usually a sort of a number versus when we finalize the budget, and sometimes they don't jive, and maybe that's where that came from. But I just thought I'd ask the question to see if I was on the right track with that.
Through the chair, when the ministry does provide some funding for our capital projects, it's based on square footage per pupil. When we actually go out to tender and budget for the project, at times what our budget is lower than the expected funding, so that becomes our budgeted build capacity. It is available for future projects. We do have to apply to the ministry, but any amounts that are budgeted less than the ministry funded are put into a build capacity bucket, so to speak, and then it is available for future capital projects, again, pending ministry approval.
Thank you. Are there any other comments or questions on this topic tonight? Seeing none, thank you very much for your report tonight, Superintendent Cullen and Superintendent Veerman. So the next item is International Students Update. Superintendent Truffin, report 16032 on page 104 of your board package. Welcome, Superintendent Truffin.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Before you, trustees, you have a report. It's really actually an update on our international students. You recall it was actually approximately a year ago, Associate Director Miller gave a verbal report on international students. We've been pretty busy with our international student program. In the report, you'll see that we've added a full-time visa coordinator. As of a couple weeks ago, we've allocated a full-time secretary to help with the program. We've moved our international student program to our Welcome Center in Milton. We have signed on a couple of agents, one from Asia, one from Turkey. We've attended a fair where we've personally met with some agents. And in the appendix, you will see the number of students that we have in our system as of last week and the countries that are represented in our system. So we are truly a global, we have kids from all around the world. So I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have this evening.
Thank you very much. Do we have any comments or questions for Superintendent Truffin? Trustee Harvey Hope.
Thank you. I understand how we end up with secondary students, and that I've actually met a couple that are at Oakville Trafalgar. I'm curious to see how much higher White Oaks is than the rest of them. I mean, they're twice the size of every other high school, but they have 10 times the number of international students. But my real question is, how do we end up with elementary students that are visa students? Because they're not usually sent away from home in grade. I mean, I could presume maybe the older grades, or maybe they haven't quite found their property tax paying families here in Halton. But I'm just curious how we end up with elementary students that are visa.
Great question. To the chair, Trustee Harvey Hope, most of the time in the elementary, they're actually staying with relatives. They're not staying in homestays. So that's the biggest difference. Oh, White Oaks, sorry. That is one of our ELL centers for when students are assessed. White Oaks is a center. and so is TA Blakelock. So that's why you would have more students at those two schools in Oakville.
Thank you. Trustee Gray.
Yes, thank you, through the chair. I just want to know from Superintendent Sonnenfeld, if we have a target number that we're trying to achieve, what would be the number that we would be wishing to welcome to Halton in the years to come, and the capacity that we have to welcome these students? Are there, is there an upper level that is something that we would want to achieve, or is it as many that would like to come are welcome to come? Just
Great.
wondering about the accommodation issues.
And I think that's a great question. And this year our target was 300, and we're sitting about 310. Next year we're looking at to grow to about 450 students. However, that being said, the students, we wouldn't grow it to a point where we would not be able to accommodate the students in our schools, and those schools are staffed accordingly as well. So we would not grow it to a point where we are not supporting our schools and supporting our kids the way we should be.
Director Miller.
Through your chair, Amos, to Trustee Gray. If you recall, last year in the verbal report, I talked about a 3-year plan. This is year 2. Year 2 was 300. Year 3 is, as Superintendent Truffin has said, 450. We were very deliberate. We are very deliberate in growing this slowly and you know, in a step process, so that we didn't. Other boards have experienced exploding growth really quickly and experienced all sorts of challenges. So we took a very cautious kind of approach, and I would say that the Halton District School Board has very little difficulty in attracting students. And now that we've signed agents, I think we will be, well, we already do. We will be turning students away to ensure that we do it in a measured, appropriate way. So,
Thank you. Vice Chair Graves.
Mine is just a comment. Just looking through the numbers, very pleased to see Craig Kielberger on the list, having 15 students, and looking at the country representation as well. It just makes me very excited about all of the learning the students at Craig Kielberger will be able to do in interacting with these students from these countries, and seeing how things are the same and different, and really learning from them and getting a global perspective of the world, which I think is really important moving forward. So thank you, everyone, for your work on this. I think it's great.
Thank you. Trustee Schneider.
Through you, Chair. I actually have been conducting interviews on this topic through the international students, because I noticed something about their well-being, being teenagers mostly in the high schools. As you can see, Abbey Park's number is second, not to a close second to WASP, but there, and I've gone around and talked to most of them. And a lot of them, of course, miss home because they live alone and they're still very young. So I know you mentioned the Halton Learning Center, or the
Welcome Center.
The Welcome Center. And I was just wondering if there's any programs in place to make sure that the students' well-being are taken care of, considering they're away from home, away from their culture, and away from their family.
A great question, Trustee Schneider. I think that some of the students, you know, when the students come to the Welcome Center, they're assessed, and they meet our visa coordinator, and they meet our secretary, they meet our assessor. We also have settlement workers that they could access. However, I guess my advice would be, in your discussion with any of those students, if they're somewhat homesick, or, you know, access to, you know, they're our students. You know, we treat them as our students, and we want them to access the services that are at their school. So I can't encourage them enough to go to their administration, go to their social worker, go to their student success teacher to access resources there first, because you know what? That's their school, and they're part of the Halton, and we want them to be part of, you know, the school that they are, and especially if it's Abbey Park. That's my best advice.
Thank you. Trustee Collard.
Thank you. My question is more about Burlington. I'm noticing that there's only 25 secondary students, international students, in all of Burlington. And you mentioned that there is English language learning at Blakelock and White Oaks, and that's why they have such high numbers. I'm wondering, where's the English language learning happening in Burlington, and what can we do to attract more students to Burlington, especially given that the Burlington high schools in the south of the city have real enrollment pressures?
Through the chair to Trustee Collard, that's at Burlington Central High School. And certainly, when this school is selected, it depends on when their homestay is. So, you know, a lot of the homestays right now are in Burlington, or sorry, in Oakville, excuse me. And so transportation would be to White Oaks and or to Blakelock, but that is something that I know I'm discussing with my visa coordinator. Yeah. But it depends where the homestay is.
Thank you. Are there any other comments or questions on this topic tonight? Seeing none, thank you very much for your report, Superintendent Truffin. So the next item is the Director's Annual Report. Director Miller, Report 16039 on page 106 of your board package. Director Miller.
Thank you, Chair Amos. As I reported a few weeks ago in my director's report this year, in the board director's report, that the director's annual report for the first time will be entirely online. So we've saved probably 40 million trees or whatever it is we've saved, but I think it's more accessible to people. I've had a look at it. Well, I've had more than a look at it. I've read through it, and I really like the look of it. It looks great. It came online today. The link came online at 5 o'clock. So there's a couple of, really nice features about it being online. Due to circumstances, there might be one or two things not there, such as the address or the welcome by the chair. That can be added at any time as soon as it's completed, and it will be added probably early next week. And I need to point out that there's some data missing that has been in previous years because we don't have the data. Every year we compare grade 3, grade 6 EQAO data. We were unable to do that this year. And even with the grade 9 math data, we don't have some of the provincial data. So we've put in our grade 9 data, but we haven't compared it to the province per se. So there's a few gaps. This is a requirement under the Ed Act, and our director's report is a wee bit later than it normally is. It's usually in December that it's distributed. All boards are late. Well, I shouldn't say all boards, but most boards are later this year, and most boards are doing what we did and are not putting in data in. Some put in previous year's data, etc. But I'm happy to report that we are one of the few boards doing it entirely online now. We could get paper copies for people if they really needed them, but most boards are still doing hard copies. And next year we hope to return to normal. And no one is, prior to it not coming out when it's supposed to in December, we did have conversations with the ministry, and the ministry was satisfied that this wasn't an issue this year because of sanctions, et cetera, and all those other things, so they weren't concerned. So I'll leave it open to if there are any questions or comments. Thanks.
Comments or questions?
I have a comment.
Okay, go ahead.
Chair Amos's comments are now up online. So
I had a very short timeline. Thank you for that. Trustee Graves.
Great. I think this is great. I like that it's online and saving trees. I'm trying to do almost everything digital. I'm not quite there yet, but I think this is fantastic. My question is around just sort of accessibility of the webpage. So right now to find it, one has to go to trustees and, boardroom and trustees. And on the left, the director's report there. Is there any discussion about moving that closer to the first page?
if I may, through the chair, to Vice Chair Graves, we will be doing a news release announcing its release, also tweeting it, and that will be linked then from the main page. Our news releases are highlighted on the front page of the website, and that will be directly linked back to the page as well. It's also easily found by keying in Director's Annual Report in the search function on the top right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other comments or questions on the Director's report today? Director Miller.
Thank you, Chair Amos. I just want to thank all the work of Marnie Denton and Manager Director's Office, Gail Gorebaker, and in particular our new webmaster, Caroline. Caroline Brown. As was the will of the board, we are making big progress, I think. We're not where we want to be, but we're certainly on that right road to making our website very accessible and our director's reports very accessible. And I think I want to give credit where credit's due, so thanks.
Thank you. So we're now up to the admin procedure update. Director Miller, report 16031 on page 108 of your board package. Director Miller.
Thank you, Chair Amos. As you can see, there's several admin procedures, but they're all, the changes are date changes, and there's some minor changes in sign guidelines and a minor change with deferred leave, updated terminology, re-sick leave.
Is there any questions or comments on this topic? Seeing none, we'll move on to the next item, which is the board report update. Director Miller, report 16040 on page 111 of your board package. Director Miller.
Thank you, Chair Amos. Just two comments on the board reports. One, we talked about changing, but for some reason we didn't, and that's the ARC announcement. It says March 2nd there. We will not be making an ARC announcement March 2nd. It'll be later in this year, if not the beginning of next school year, because as I outlined the last meeting, the process that we have to go through, the Board of Trustees have just approved the policy this evening, and we now have to look at the LTAP coming forward, then community meetings around community hubs, etc., and then we can start doing that work. So that date will be changed. Also, the other one I want to take note of, generally, the Center for Skills Development and Training report comes around now. We've moved that to April for various reasons, I guess. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any comments or questions on the board report update? Seeing none, we're now up to committee reports. Do we have any committee reports tonight? Seeing none, we will now move up to the director's report. Director Miller.
Thank you, Chair Amos. I've just got a couple of things. The first one is thank you to everybody, and you've seen some of the results, or the comments, shall I say, of the multi-year plan report, or comments, feedback, how we did it. I particularly like the fact that we had very many stakeholders involved, and 2 sessions, etc. And we had I think, a real range of the Halton community contribute their comments. The next meeting is March 8th. That's also the night of Senate. I think it's much more difficult for the students to change theirs because it involves students. They have to get rides for parents and everything. So we are moving our venue to New Street in the Brock Room there. So that will allow the Senate to be accommodated here. Huh? Oh. Well, then we will unbook New Street and we will come to... Okay, so correction. Thanks, Sophie Jovan. I've learned my lesson, Trustee Daniele. Anyway, our multi-year planning will be in the boardroom on March 8th. But there's one other comment I want to make. The superintendents, there's an opportunity for them to go to an OPSOA session from 6 till 9 on that evening. So with the indulgence of the trustees, I'll be presenting data. And so I'm going to allow the superintendents to arrive slightly late for our session, which begins at 6, but I imagine most of them will be here by about 6:30. No, sorry, 3 to 6. We're 6 to 9. And so now that I've completely confused everybody, the multi-year plan here, March 8th, superintendents, some of, will be late. All right. The last thing I want to report is about a pretty exciting thing that's happening right now as we speak at York. I believe it's at York University. It is. A team from Irma Colson was selected out of 30 educators in the province to participate in a year-long project entitled All Eyes on Education, Imagination, Integration, Innovation. The project was funded by the Ontario Ministry of Education and the Council of Ontario Directors of Education and was delivered through York University faculty. The All Is on Education project showcases the innovative, imaginative, and integrated teacher practice through teacher-led, classroom-based inquiry projects and is being led by York Education Professor Kathleen Gould-Lundy. 3 classes of grade 7 and grade 8 students from Irma Colson and their principal Merrill Matthews worked with the research team, York University, to investigate how math, science, visual arts, and technology could be reimagined in their classroom learning experiences. Specifically, they engaged in a collaborative inquiry to explore the relevance and beauty of Milton's natural landscape, the properties of the natural elements found in Milton. The classes presented their project in an integrated arts performance playing the roles of their future selves as they lead to protect and sustain the environment. Tonight is the final presentation entitled Voices of Innovative Practitioners at York University and is the final culmination of the project. Teacher leaders from each of the school boards will perform a monologue revealing their own professional learning and growth through this collaborative inquiry processing using integrated arts and technology. Erin Walsh, currently at the Welcome Center and formerly at Irma Colson, has been selected to have her performance showcased on behalf of Irma Colson school participants. And we have the Assistant Principal Mary Jane Farish in attendance, and Superintendent Etoff was going to be there, but unfortunately he's at home with a sore back. So, and that's it for my report. Thanks.
Thank you. Are there any comments or questions for the director on his report tonight? Seeing none, we're now up to communications from the chair. I have 2 items. The first item is last week, the vice chair, the director, and I myself attended a roundtable for chairs, vice chairs, and directors from across the province held by the Ontario Education Services Corporation. It was a very good day. There was an opportunity for networking with some of the different boards, as well as a lot of good information. We had 2 different speakers talking about board governance and about, help me out, I'm drawing a blank.
The president of Laurentian University.
Oh, the president of Laurentian University spoke on trends and information in education and strategic planning, and they talked about the director performance review, which we actually are doing a very good job on, and there was only one item I think we fell short on in that, right?
The item we fell short on was making the goals available to staff and public, which I think I put in my blog yesterday that it's probably something we should have a conversation about.
Yeah. And so at the end of the day, they asked us to envision ourselves in a year's time and taking some of the information from the session, and that we have won an award and we're going to be on the cover of any magazine that we wanted. And so we picked Governance Today, and we said it was all of us in this room's nobody would get profiled individually. It was because it was a joint thing, and the fact that the strides that we had made forward because we all worked together for the students. So anyways, it was a very good day. The other item I have is today is Random Acts of Kindness Day. And so I hope everybody had an opportunity, but it's also Random Act of Kindness Week. So if you didn't get a chance today, you can maybe do it this week. But as we all know, we all try to do it every day anyway. But so I have no other items at this time, so it's up to trustee questions and comments. Do we have any trustee questions and comments tonight? Trustee Harvey Hope.
This is actually a committee report that I missed. Anyway, audit committee met yesterday, and we are also meeting, our next meeting will be in April. And one of the highlights of the meeting probably would be discussing how to be open and closed meetings. And so you'll see that coming through, and it'll percolate, and we'll have some information about that. And the terms of reference will be coming out through into the public realm to have people give their opinions on. Former trustees, people out there who are on other audit committees, we need a little bit more fleshing out of some of the details, and somebody looking at it might realize that we have forgotten something that has come up in their experience. And on a personal trustee note, I stopped by the Halton curling semifinals for the intermediate teams today, and so I haven't heard the results yet because I had to leave to get here, but TA Blakelock and OT Oakville Trafalgar and Assumption, I think, is a Burlington Catholic school. So those 4 teams were the Wednesday intermediate group, and then there's a novice group on the Monday. And apparently curling is taking off in Halton, in that they had a lot of children participating in this intramural league. So it's nice to see everybody getting involved, and I'm looking forward to going home and finding out the results.
Thank you. Trustee L. Harrison.
Thank you. I too missed the committee reports, so
okay, you guys.
I was trying. Halton Eco Learning Partnership met last week, and a few items of note. The Grade 4 Earth Keepers program is being replaced with a new program developed collaboratively with Canadian Wildlife Federation, so that's exciting. There was talk of how to encourage schools to utilize ethical motivators, environmentally ethical motivators in their fundraising. So looking for choices that are beyond globe bracelets as prizing. So that's something that the group is thinking about. Winter Walk Day, we had 36 elementary schools that participated, which was great. And let's see here. Oh, we were challenged in advance of budget deliberations to come up with environmentally sound practices that can also save dollars at the board, and it was a really interesting conversation. I think there was some great ideas that came through and hopefully will flow through the process. So I'm thankful to the director for issuing that challenge. Okay, so onward towards 1 and 2 Oakville. Firstly, I wanted to give a shout out to the NBA, yes, the National Basketball Association, for that amazing program that was mentioned last week. I know there are a number of students from many area schools that I think it was in the last few days that they got to participate. Last Friday, there were 400 students that got to participate, and I know that they were extremely happy about that opportunity. So thank you to the NBA, which is something I never thought I'd find myself saying. But I love basketball. I just didn't think I'd get to talk about it here. And then lastly, shout out to Tay Blakelock. Their breakfast program has been featured by the National Grocery Foundation, and there is one student that has become a breakfast program and food advocate, and she's participating provincially in conversations with students and student voice on that topic. So that's fantastic. Thanks.
Thank you. Trustee Pappen.
Thank you. This is not a committee report. I just wanted to mention that the next accessibility coordinating meeting has been postponed until May the 5th. If we do need another one, we'll schedule another one for June. And I also want to mention my next Family of Schools meeting is tomorrow night at Lester B. Pearson, 6:30 to 8, and Superintendent Blackwell will be presenting on the health and physical education curriculum. And lastly, I just wanted to make a shout out to Superintendent Etoff, because I know he's watching. Wish him well. As he said, he thought we'd be more exciting than Netflix. Thank you.
Really? Okay. Trustee Reynolds.
Thank you. I was not in attendance at the last board meeting, so I was not able to personally thank Superintendents Salmini and Associate Director Bogue for all their efforts in serving the Ward 2, downtown Burlington community, and Aldershot communities. And I'd like to welcome our newly minted superintendent, Blackwell, to the Ward 2 downtown Burlington community, and Superintendent Truffin to Aldershot. I'll be looking forward to working with you both. I do have a comment that I've been receiving from constituents, and it's in regards to I think the January 1 provincial crosswalk rules. And I wanted to bring this up because while I refer these complaints to our municipal counterparts, I wanted to just raise this issue that our schools may be feeling some pressures. Certainly some of the schools in downtown Burlington are. What the problem is that during the morning rush hour, there's backup on the main streets during high peak times. And constituents are complaining to our principals who have no role in this governance. I was just wondering if our active transportation committees could be mindful of this new policy and remind our constituent walkers and our drivers that they have to refrain from entering intersections when a crossing guard is present, or if pedestrians are in the crosswalks, because I think that our principals are getting a lot of complaints. So that was just what I want to share. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Miller.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, Chair Amos. Thanks for bringing it up, Trustee Reynolds. I think we'll sit down and maybe if we could get out some communication to our school principals, and then they could distribute it to their communities in some way. Yeah, we want to take the heat off the principals. They have no role in this whatsoever. But if we can communicate in our school communications to parents that there's a new law in effect, please obey it.
Thank you. Trustee Gray.
Thank you, through you, Chair Amos. I want to put out the ultimate shout out to Mother Nature, who's helping us with sustaining our winter carnivals up in Acton. Thank you very much. We do have an excellent winter carnival happening at Robert Little on this Friday, and they were excited to see all the new snow that fell. I also want to say a shout out to our crossing guards. I've taken upon myself to do afternoon walks, trying to connect with as many after school crosswalk guards as possible, to congratulate them and thank them for hanging in there on these very, very cold days that we've experienced recently. And final report, I just want to mention from the Halton Learning Foundation, in which I represent the trustees. To date, over $70,000 has been provided to elementary and secondary schools by the Halton Learning Foundation to students who, in supporting their requests for clothing, footwear, food, athletic fees, and student conferences. As a result of the wonderful work of the Halton Learning Foundation, the foundation has been nominated by the Burlington Chamber of Commerce for a Business Excellence Award in the nonprofit sector. The event is on April 7th at the Burlington Convention Center, and so we're excited about that. I want to recommend that all trustees and senior admin present tonight make sure that you have June the 7th on your calendar, as it's the annual golf tournament at the Granite Ridge Golf Club in Milton. It would be great to have as many people as possible participate or, in fact, assist with that major fundraiser. And again, all the funds going to help with our students. And finally, over the next month, some really exciting news. Over $130,000 will be distributed to schools in the next month for areas of support, including art, music, physical education, and media literacy, and a special environmental grant provided by CN Rail. Some of this money has been provided by Maple Lodge Farms Foundation. So all of this, $130,000 going out in grants to support our students. What a wonderful, impactful way of spreading some good news and cheer in these long winter months. So thank you to the Halton Learning Foundation.
Thank you. Trustee Oliver.
Thank you, Chair. Along the lines of winter and winter carnivals, I know that in Ward 4, various schools are right now hosting their winter carnivals. For example, Heritage Glen had theirs today. And I'd like to express my thanks to staff who make this a very special and fun event for the students, and express my great gratitude and thanks to all the parent volunteers who make enormous amounts of pancakes and decorations and supervise the various fun events that the kids enjoy. So thanks to all the parents.
Thank you. And I believe the list has been exhausted. So we are now up to a motion for adjournment. Do I have a motion to adjourn before 9? Trustee L. Harrison, seconded by Trustee Pappen. So, just a minute. Yeah, I saw all the options. All those in favor? It's always good to have options. Oh, Amy didn't sign it, so. That passes unanimously. Thank you very much, and have a great evening, everyone.
Check on your buddy.